But when that young girl has had that long-term intensive investment, she will probably be as strong, if not hungrier, than that other person that perhaps was less vulnerable. And I think that's the challenge, to say we're all in this together. We need to work, we need to build the bridge from both sides for all of us to flourish.
Hello and welcome to the Impact Insiders podcast, a podcast that explores the real life examples of people and organizations that are making an impact. In this episode, we will be talking about youth, particularly youth empowerment through promotion of psychological well-being. Today, we will be talking about the fantastic work that is being done by Gold Youth Development Agency to promote and leverage the inherent connection that young people have among each other, and to promote social behavioral change and promote a commitment to education and skills development. My name is Edith Mushapiri, and I will look after research and insights at Relative Impact. And I'm excited to welcome into the room Susannah Farr of Gold Youth Development Agency, Gold Youth for short, to talk about the youth and the work that they're doing to create a growing pipeline for future leaders. Hi, Susannah. How are you? And
Hi,
welcome to Impact Insiders.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Really excited to have you with us today and to share your journey with us and the work that you're doing as an organization. We've been working with Gold Youth for a number of years now, and it's really been exciting to walk this journey with them and see the work and the impact that the organization and Susannah are creating in our communities. So Susannah, can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
I was born and raised in South Africa. I'm now in Kigali in Rwanda. South Africa, as we know, is one of the most beautiful yet unequal countries on earth. I had the gift really of growing up as a teenager with three younger Xhosa siblings. They joined our family when their father was murdered. As a teenager, I became increasingly restless about the socioeconomic divide in our nation. It wasn't okay that most young people were still born into poverty, with few role models journeying with them, and they didn't believe in their purpose, their potential, or that they have, I guess, equal value to you and me. And I had an extraordinary Xhosa mentor. Her name was Lydia Machlanga. She was an activist, and she invested many hours over many years really in me, and just was committed to holding me accountable to this growing why that was in my heart, to actually do something about seeing the potential in each young person to become realized, and how when this is multiplied in this army of youth that actually know the goal that is inside of them and are living this out with purpose and vision, it can actually change systems that have been entrenched for hundreds of years in Africa. So yeah, this was the dream really that motivated me to start what has become Gold Youth today.
It's really interesting. And I think that background, starting right from a grassroots level, it really does inform some of the decisions that we make as adults and some of the opportunities that then come out for us. How has it grown and how has it changed over time?
Thanks, Edith. So I think the dream has remained the same. We've actually had very little mission drift, but I think we've grown and we've matured and we've learned from our mistakes. I think we've worked hard from the get-go to always be learning from diverse contexts in Africa, and just from multi-stakeholder relationships, and that cohesion with that ecosystem has been really important in just enabling us to keep refining and taking the evidence and being adaptable so that we're improving the way we serve and also just co-create with young people more effectively. We started off in South Africa with smaller pilots in Zambia and Botswana, and we're now operational in 5 African countries with a few small sites also in Uganda. I think some of the key changes in 2011, we created a social enterprise, and that was when we embraced this hybrid identity journey with this long-term sustainability lens without compromising the same why. So just how do we use for-profit and non-profit together to achieve sort of sustainable development. We also, had some real learnings, and it led us to saying, how do we serve young people beyond the school system into that out of school youth space, which has so many barriers to entry. And in 2015, we just had a very deliberate deepening of our offering to out of school youth and our alumni, which we call Gold Grads, to keep that relational capital into adulthood and practically looking at how do we support them to further studies and connect them to jobs. And for those that are enterprising, how do we incubate micro businesses that serve the community, empower the community, and employ the community? And we're beginning to see, fruit of those changes, where they're now nation builders that are paying it forward. The other key change was just we dreamed bigger. We said, let's aim for 10 million, not 1 million. We set a goal for 2032, and that's what we're chasing, where we see those 10 million having the character and the integrity as young leaders to then in turn mobilize their peers and their generation with the tools and support to reach their potential. And we've become, I think, more and more pedantic with your help, just in impact management and being rigorous around, are we seeing concrete outcomes in social behavior change, in improved education, in employability that's leading to job creation, and keeping that North Star of system change that we really want to see. We want to shift the dial. So these are the indicators. Are they keeping us on track? But the dream has remained the same.
It's exciting to see that it's grown and it's now a Pan-African story of ensuring that, our youth and our communities are uplifted. And having worked with youth before, I'm sure it's no surprise, but it's a very interesting age group, very colorful age group, very ambitious. They always do fun and exciting things, and they bring new ideas to even the most challenging situations. They just bring the most incredible energy. What are some of your highlights of working with young people in the system change space?
I think young people don't change with information alone. They change when people close to them change, and they're energetic, as you said, they're adaptable, they're full of life. They've got amazing ideas and they want to be heard. And, we've seen just over the years, repeatedly, when a young person is given the opportunity to be a part of something, bigger than themselves, even the most negative young person in really desperate circumstances, often in a tough situation, something in them rises up and they want to be a positive force for change. Those are the stories that just, and it plays out in so many different ways. In fact, Edith, last week, I was actually talking to a young boy, a young man who was a young boy. And at this time, a peer educator, girl peer educator, believed in him. And he said this friend had encouraged him to stay in school. And now this young man is actually pursuing education because he wants to pay it forward. And I think that's almost the highlight at the heart of what we do, is this each one reach one strategy, but it's scalable. The power of youth-led change, really.
That's incredible. And it's backed by, a lot of strong research that shows that when young people see somebody that they admire and they respect, and they see them doing something that is, whatever it is, they're inspired to want to go down that route as well. So having this platform where they can follow young people who have been instructed to create positive change in our societies, that's super exciting, and can't wait to hear more stories coming out of the Gold Grads and the Nation Builder teams, which is really exciting. Can't wait to see what the future holds for Gold Youth. But coming out of the space and the organization as a whole, and just focusing on youth and the challenges that they face, given the scale and complexity of the challenges facing youth in Africa, and having worked to implement systemic interventions, there's a lot of work that we see when we engage with corporate and private sector, and a lot of testimonies around the work that they're doing to impact youth. Do you feel that the private sector is really making inroads in supporting the youth?
So let me start by being positive. I do believe that the private sector is more aware than ever before. And I think that is starting to translate into deeper engagement and strategic shifts, I think, that are needed for that longer term, almost restorative justice that we need with young people. But I think there's still too many quick fixes, too many tick box motivated efforts. We need to be collaborating more intentionally, I think, on addressing root issues if we want to see that system change. And I think the challenge lies in the complexity of expectations on and outcomes on both ends. I think youth need experience, and the private sector is motivated by profit, performance, so they can't afford inexperience. And yet we need the private sector to step up and, just participate more fully in apprenticeships and learnerships and the deep mentoring and or support organizations that are working with youth. We can't compare a job, for example, of a young girl who has good English, who had a maths teacher at school, who maybe had a parent that was modeling work ethic and transitions into the workplace, with that 13-year-old that right now describes her life as meaningless, doesn't listen to her single mom, is at risk of dropping out of school, of having a teenage pregnancy. That takes time. But that is, there are 200 million young people like her right now, that if we don't invest and see that as a dividend to be harnessed, it's going to impact on all of us. There isn't really a plan B, and we have to realize that takes time. But when that young girl has had that long-term intensive investment, she will probably be as strong, if not hungrier, than that other person that perhaps was less vulnerable. And I think that's the challenge, to say we're all in this together. We need to work, we need to build the bridge from both sides for all of us to flourish.
Yeah. And just thinking about, you mentioned young girls, adolescent girls and young women just being at extremely high risk in the African context, very vulnerable community. And we see a lot of work going on in that space, but you're right, it absolutely does need to be a joint effort in ensuring that whatever interventions are put into place, that impact endures. I know that, just coming back to just pulling from what you mentioned in the introduction for Gold, there's a part of the work that you're doing that's around micro businesses and creating that mindset shift that, once you've graduated or once you finish school, it's more than just looking for a job. It's also about, in my space, in my current environment, what can I be doing to make my life better? What we've also sometimes experienced, having worked with youth, is that there's some challenges and barriers that come up once the conversation has started. We've identified the opportunity, entrepreneurship, and creating jobs, but then there's some barriers that come up as we start to implement. Have you seen some of these barriers and challenges coming up for the youth in your experiences of working with them and trying to go out into the world to create a life for themselves?
Yeah, absolutely, Edith. And I think that was one of the reasons why we really have strategically focused on out of school youth and just walking that journey beyond school with our peer educators and really letting them know that they have a network. I think the barriers to entry for youth from marginalized communities is just that much harder. And many young people, don't have the networks that maybe others do who have had a more privileged upbringing or access to parents and their networks through work. And I think we've also just, because we choose communities where unemployment is high and orphanhood is high, and we intentionally go to the hardest hit, we know we're going into communities where there are few, if any, jobs. And so from the get-go, we're saying, how do we get alongside the communities? How do we strengthen communities, not just youth, and create these enabling environments where young people can have a voice, but also have the agency to come up with solutions and opportunities in their communities, and not see that by leaving my community, that is success. But actually, how do I create that microeconomy and see the community as a community I can be part of making better? And I think young people also need to see in their community someone modeling that. They need to see practically, okay, it's possible. And I think for us, getting industry leaders and parents and it takes a village, literally, but also often helping young people to have that micro business incubation process is so critical. But it needs to be a young person that is likely to flourish as someone who can know that their salary is not coming at the end of the month. Not everyone is enterprising. And so we've been very intentional to look at who is likely to flourish in the entrepreneurship space, and it's not everyone. But then those that can, how can we also have them become the employers of tomorrow? Because if we don't create jobs, there are no jobs. And we also know that if we want young people seeing their communities as a place where they are proud of, they can't be busing to a city for 3 hours. So it's a challenge, but we have to make it work. And we're also looking at how can we allow communities to share with one another. So how can a community in a rural area like Mpumalanga share with a community in Chingola in Zambia, for example, around chickens? Let's not make each other's mistakes. So we're trying to be innovative in connecting networks with networks whilst looking at that micro impact. But what does this look like, if we want to scale it at a greater level?
Literally learning from each other, peer-to-peer learning, but not from a high school space or from a community center space, but from a Mpumalanga to somewhere in Zambia, and connecting that to somebody that's in Rwanda, and bringing those mindsets together to say, how do we make this work and how do we do this? And I think I'd also like to get your opinion on this, but communities just opening, and adults opening their ears to listen to the solutions that young people have. I've had the most interesting experience of asking primary school kids their solutions for load shedding. And I've heard the most incredible things. And as an adult, my default is to go, how? And I was challenged by somebody to say, that question that you have, take it back to the young people, take it back to the primary, they were all in grade 7, take it back to the grade 7s and ask them, how do you think, this is your idea, can you walk me through how we're going to do that? Do you feel that we do that enough with the young people that are in our communities, in fact, young people in Africa, do you feel that we do that enough, lend a listening ear to their solutions and the things that they've identified?
So I think we can just keep on doing it better and better. I think if we were, we wouldn't be facing the challenges that we are at such, a massive scale. And I think we can all be better at giving young people spaces to be heard, particularly vulnerable youth and the marginalized. I think they understand the issues in their community. They know the hardships. They are the experts on the ground. And I think when they are truly empowered, their insights and their ideas are probably totally in line with what is really needed in those communities. And it's how do we co-create and collaborate? And I think it's just how do we get better at those that have money, not seeing themselves as more powerful, but really partnering with community and giving, young people voices. I think government, we need to move from just, listening, but to real action. Young people need to see action. They want to see action. They want to actually see tangible results that because we inputted, it has now started benefiting my peers. And it's a challenge because youth development is not rocket science, but it's long term. We don't always see the fruit of our investment until years later. But young people, they want to see change. And I think we have to allow them to participate in policy frameworks, in interventions, in what those solutions are that affect them and their peers, and put them and trust them. I think to trust young people that, and they're going to make mistakes, and we all make mistakes, but I think that's how we learn. But how do we make sure that they're at the center of the very solutions that impact them and not on the side?
It's almost around creating a safe space for them to be able to make those mistakes as well. But trust being a big word to that discussion, being able to create the platform and trust that the work that the suggestions, recommendations, the things that they've identified are validated, and that this is something that we actually absolutely can run through, but also making it a safe place to allow mistakes to happen, and understanding that it's a growth curve and we are learning.
And accountable. I think it's not saying that everything a young person does or says is right. I think strong accountability is so important, but most young people like boundaries. They want high standards and they want accountability, and they want to know that there are consequences. And I think we'll be surprised at just how, with accountability, but also deep trust coming together, what young people are capable of. In South Africa, the walls of apartheid came down because of young people.
Coming back to growth and learnings, We've just come out of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've had to experience new dimensions of things that we never thought were possible, and apply new things into our work and lives, family structures that no one had actually quite envisioned. So following from the pandemic and just thinking about growth and learnings and the opportunities to engage youth and the challenges they face that have reshaped themselves, the challenges in themselves have reshaped themselves.
Yeah.
What are some of the adjustments that, purpose-led organizations have needed to make, have made in the work that they do, the resourcing strategies, how we implement our programs, how we support the youth?
Thanks, Edith. So I think, and I can speak for ourselves and perhaps our partners, with our youth peer education model, it's very human centered, and it's really at the end of the day around face-to-face engagements. And so it's been a challenge for us. We have our unemployed youth that are placed full-time in schools and communities as role models, mentors, education agents, and they in turn work with adolescent opinion leaders who in turn are training and mentoring their peers. And it's within this enabling environment of a community. And so, post-COVID, we're saying, how do we, without diluting the power of this human engagement, how do we use technology as an enabler to help us achieve wider impact of the same face-to-face engagement? And so we've, it's not the silver bullet, but we've really, seen many organizations either resisting it or trying to just fit it in. And I think we've really just said, let's catch the wave, let's embrace it fully. And let's also get young people at each level of what we call our leadership pipeline engaged in how we can use technology to strengthen and enhance the impact, not to dilute it in any way. And so that, we're creating a sort of agile tech engine right now to just lessen administration with offline, online capability that in the hands of youth will enable more face-to-face contacts, but capacity building and support to them being enabled more effectively with the technology. And I think it's not one or the other. I think we have to look at that blended approach. And that's definitely something that I think has been a shift for many organizations. And I think we're all stronger for it, but just being very careful that we're not, leaving young people behind. And I think digital equity and digital inclusion and digital literacy remains one of the biggest challenges. And although many people may have pivoted forward, the UNESCO report just so clearly just highlights how this face-to-face school was a sanctuary. And when young people didn't have access to others, just mental health, just all the challenges. So I think in summary, it's yes, embracing technology, but not at the expense of that human connection. It has to enable and enhance deeper connection and deeper scale. And I think we've still got a long way to go. So I think globally, I think it's new.
So knowing all of this and wanting to improve, a lot of work that is being done with youth and youth development doesn't work in isolation. We need to have additional stakeholders, communities, parents, teachers, community leaders, local government, private sector, government. How can we improve? What can we be doing better?
Big question. I think just to be present to youth and to not see young people as a sector, but to really, I think the facts are that the majority of our population is young, and youth need to be mainstreamed in every sector. And I think when we have that shift, it means that in everything we do, we're thinking, how do we raise up the next generation? I'm a product of people investing in the next generation. And I think whether you're a corporate, take a risk and take someone just out of school and just be willing to do the mentorship, invest relationally. I think, sometimes we think, oh, I'm supporting a child because I'm sending school fees, but maybe that young girl needs menstrual pads for her whole school life. That's what her mother needs, so she doesn't miss 25% of her schooling. I think when we separate the mentorship and the relational and spiritual and psychosocial support from the technical support or the financial support, we are missing the fact that to achieve youth development and youth flourishing, we need to be holistic. And I think if we can all do something with what we've got from where we are, from what we know, to make a difference in someone younger, that's already, if we can have that on a macro level, we will see big changes. I think there are many solutions. There's evidence of hope, but we need to now scale up what works. And so I think let's not recreate the wheel. Let's find out who is doing the hard work. How do we back them to deepen and widen the impact that they already have? Yeah, and I think whether we're in a community or whether you are in business, in your lane, what is it that you can do just to be part of changing the narrative of this youth bulge crisis, to saying this is our hope, this is our future, and let's harness this extraordinary dividend. And every seed is something that's going to grow into something bigger.
On that note, I want to sort of ask you for some advice. And in this particular case, I am a change maker, upcoming change maker, and I really don't know how to get started, but I do recognize that there is a space in my community, in my environment. I've identified what I want to do, but I just don't know how to get started. What advice would you give me as an upcoming change maker on creating my impact?
That reminds me, I'm going to steal an answer from my colleague who's 25, but I was actually sharing a panel for the Commonwealth Youth Forum that happened recently. It was in Rwanda. The Commonwealth Heads of Government had a youth forum, and it was just looking at young people on the globe. And one of the similar question was posed to my colleague, and I love to answer. I think she described the story that her dad had shared with her. You're walking down the road and someone says, "Oh, I like your pants." You have two choices. You can say, "Oh, okay, you can go buy them here," or you can take them off, sell them, and now you're an entrepreneur and you've started. And I think just sometimes we miss what's right there. We think that we've got to go big. And I think we mustn't despise that small beginning. I think we can all affect change with just one decision and a choice. And it may not be a choice to do something. It may even be something that we must stop doing, just where we put our time. And I think what I've said earlier is, and I think we've all got capacity when we realize that we can make a difference, whether that is to volunteer or to give financially or to just learn. But how can we get on board with where there is evidence to deepen it and widen it? Get involved with someone, get a mentor to help you start something, or back someone that's already wanting to grow. But let's not sit back and say this is not for me. And I think change, it's individuals that decide to make a change, that decide to solve the big issues at scale. It's not always an organization. It's individuals like you and I that catalyze others to get on board. And I think that's where we awaken the change maker in us. Where is that next step where I can have the most impact with my skills, my talent, my passions? And I think if we can find out what is my why and we can just channel that next effort, we can all make a bigger difference. And that's how we're going to collectively shift that dial. It's not one person, it's that ecosystem, but with that shared North Star. And there's an urgency, the crisis is not coming, it's here. And I think where we invest our time and if we sit apathetically, we're not going to see the flourishing that we know is possible. It's possible. It's not for lack of possibility and potential, but it's a cost. We have to work hard and be long-term and invest and get alongside young people.
That's absolutely brilliant. I'm still the example that you gave about, you've got a choice, you've got the pants, somebody's commented on them. What are you going to do? You've got a decision that you need to make there, but the choice is in our hands, and we do have the capacity to make the right decision to be able to achieve our goals. That is very inspiring. I am going to take that as well. I think I'm definitely going to use that in a different platform.
A stolen story.
That is, wow, that's really, for me, that really resonated. Absolutely. Susannah, thank you so much. This has been fascinating. It's been informative. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you've had a great time on our podcast with us today.
Thank you, Edith. Thank you for all the amazing work you're doing.
And I'd also like to thank everybody that's listening to us on our podcast. We will include all of the links and references that we've chatted about today in the episode show notes, and our podcast will be up on the website. But this has been Impact Insiders Podcast, powered by Relative Impact. Please subscribe to our podcast and make sure that you don't miss any future episodes. For more information about Relative Impact and the work that we're doing, please have a look at our website and sign up for our newsletter to get updates directly into your inbox. Thanks, everyone.